The artillery round screamed overhead and detonated 50 meters behind the ridgeline. Dante Larson pressed his face into frozen earth that smelled of pine sap and cordite. Ice crystals bit into his cheek. Around him, 8 SEALs hugged the ground as shrapnel whispered through the air above them. Third barrage in 20 minutes. Marcus Chen reported from his position near the communications equipment. They've got our range. Dante lifted his head just enough to scan the valley. The Alps stretched around them in endless white, peaks like broken teeth against a moonless sky. Somewhere up on that eastern slope, hidden in forest and rock, an enemy artillery battery was systematically destroying his team. "Sir." The voice came from behind him. Female, calm. Dante turned. Aurora Hale stood 3 meters away, barely visible in her white camouflage. She was small, maybe 5'6", with a frame that looked too slight for the M200 rifle slung across her back. Dark eyes studied the terrain with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Specialist Hale," he acknowledged. He didn't try to hide his skepticism. Command had attached her to the team 48 hours ago. A sniper, they said. One of the best. But this was the Alps in January, and the temperature hadn't risen above -15°C in 3 days. "The battery is positioned on the northeast slope," Aurora said. "Approximately 800 meters elevation, using the tree line for concealment. They have thermal optics, which is why our movement draws fire." "We know where they are," Dante replied. "We can't reach them. Every approach is exposed." Another shell burst, closer this time. Rock fragments pattered down like hail. Aurora moved to Dante's position and knelt beside him. She pulled a topographic map from her chest pocket, already marked with elevation lines and coordinates. "There's a northern approach, steeper, no cover from artillery, but it puts you above their thermal scan arc. They're focused on this valley." Dante studied the map. The route she indicated was a near vertical climb up ice and exposed rock. "That's a suicide run, even in daylight, with full climbing gear." "I can make it," Aurora interrupted. 3 hours to summit, 30 minutes to position. I'll have line of sight on their command post." Marcus crawled over, his face tight with cold. "You'll freeze before you're halfway up. Wind chill up there is probably -40. Aurora's expression didn't change. "I trained in Alaska. Zero visibility operations, extreme cold weather survival. This is what I do." "This isn't Alaska," Dante said. "This is a hot combat zone. We don't even know how many hostiles are up there." "More than your initial intelligence suggested," Aurora replied. She tapped the map. "Listen to their fire pattern. That's not one battery, that's 3, coordinated. You're facing at least a reinforced company, maybe battalion strength." Silence. Dante exchanged glances with Marcus. If she was right, they were outnumbered 10 to 1. "If I can eliminate their fire control officer," Aurora continued, "you'll have a window to extract. 15, maybe 20 minutes before they reorganize. And if you don't make it?" Aurora stood. Snow had already accumulated on her shoulders, making her almost invisible against the white landscape. "Then you'll know the approach is possible, and you can send someone else." Before Dante could respond, she was moving not toward the rear positions, but toward the base of the northern slope. Within seconds, the darkness and falling snow had swallowed her completely. "Sir?" Marcus asked. Dante watched the spot where Aurora had disappeared. She just disobeyed a direct order. "You didn't give her an order, sir. You just said it was suicide." Another artillery round struck, and the conversation ended. Dante pressed his radio. "All units, maintain position, conserve ammunition, and pray that crazy sniper knows what she's doing." Aurora's fingers found the crack in the rock face. Ice burned against her exposed skin, but she forced her hand deeper, searching for purchase. Her boots scraped against stone as she pulled herself up another meter. The wind hit her like a physical blow. It howled down from the peaks, carrying snow that stung like needles. Visibility was less than 5 meters. Good. If she couldn't see, thermal optics couldn't see her either. She paused on a narrow ledge, breathing carefully. Cold air seared her lungs. Her watch read -32°C. The wind made it feel closer to -50. 300 meters below, the SEAL position was invisible. Above her, another 400 meters of vertical ice and rock. No ropes, no safety equipment, just her, the mountain, and the absolute certainty that any mistake would be her last. Aurora closed her eyes and let her mind drift back to Alaska. Fort Greely, 2 years ago. the zero visibility course that had broken half her class. "You don't fight the environment," her instructor had said. Staff Sergeant Rachel Vance, a woman who had survived 3 tours in Arctic conditions. "You become part of it. Your heartbeat matches the wind. Your breath matches the snow. You stop being human and start being weather." Aurora had been the only one to complete the final test, a 30-kilometer traverse in a whiteout, navigating by sound and touch alone. Vance had called her a stormwalker. A sound brought her back. Voices carried on the wind. German? No. Russian. A patrol, moving along the ridge above her. Aurora pressed herself flat against the rock. Her white camouflage blended perfectly with the ice-covered stone. She counted heartbeats. 5 seconds. 10. 20. 2 soldiers appeared out of the snow, barely visible even at 3 meters. They were scanning the valley below with night vision equipment, unaware that their target was directly beneath them. Aurora didn't move. Didn't breathe. She had learned long ago that human eyes detected motion before they detected shape. As long as she remained absolutely still, she was invisible. The soldiers talked briefly, something about the next artillery barrage, then continued their patrol. Aurora waited another full minute before moving again. She resumed climbing. Her shoulder muscles screamed. Ice had formed on her eyelashes, and each blink was painful. But pain was just information. It told her she was still alive. 2 hours into the climb, she reached a small ice cave formed by an overhang. She crawled inside and allowed herself 2 minutes of rest. Her hands shook as she pulled a map from her pocket, the one she'd taken from the dead patrol scout 3 days ago, before linking up with the SEALs. The map showed positions she'd already suspected. 3 artillery batteries, a command bunker, reserve positions. This wasn't a standard patrol, it was a fortified installation. The enemy had been planning this ambush for weeks. Aurora studied the terrain carefully. The command bunker was another 200 meters up, hidden in a reinforced position near the peak. Getting close enough for a shot would require penetrating their inner perimeter. She put the map away and checked her rifle. The M200 was still secure in its case, protected from the ice. Her ammunition was specially designed for extreme cold propellant that wouldn't fail even at -50. 2 minutes ended. Aurora crawled back out into the storm and continued climbing. "We're down to 40% ammunition." Marcus didn't need to explain what that meant. Dante nodded grimly. They'd been pinned in this position for 6 hours. The enemy artillery had found their range perfectly, and every attempt to move had drawn immediate fire. Private First Class Tommy Sullivan lay against the trench wall, his left leg wrapped in bloody bandages. Shrapnel had torn through his calf. Without proper medical evacuation, infection would set in within hours. "Sir, we need to move Sullivan," Corporal James Bennett said. "He's deteriorating." "Move him where?" Dante snapped. "Every approach is covered. We relocate, we die faster." The words hung in the frozen air. Around him, 8 SEALs, the best-trained soldiers in the world, were trapped like animals, all because some intelligence analyst had underestimated enemy strength by a factor of 3. Marcus adjusted his radio headset. Still no contact with Aurora. "She's dead," someone muttered. Dante didn't see who. "Stow that," he ordered, but his voice lacked conviction. Aurora Hale had disappeared into a blizzard 4 hours ago. The temperature had dropped another 10 degrees since then. Even if she'd successfully climbed to the summit, she'd be suffering from hypothermia by now. Another artillery barrage struck. This time, the shells landed in a pattern, walking closer to their position with each salvo. The enemy was zeroing in for a final strike. "They're going to overrun us," Marcus said quietly. "Once they're sure of our position, they'll send infantry." Dante knew he was right. Standard doctrine: pin the enemy with artillery, then sweep with ground forces. His team had maybe an hour before that happened. Tommy Sullivan coughed, a wet sound that spoke of internal bleeding. "Sir, tell my wife." "You'll tell her yourself." "Sullivan," Dante interrupted. "We're getting out of here." But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. There was no extraction route, no air support in this weather, no reinforcements close enough to matter. He thought about Aurora again. That small figure disappearing into the storm. She'd seemed so certain, so calm, either incredibly brave or completely insane. If she survived this cold, Dante whispered to himself, that would be a miracle. The radio crackled. For a moment, Dante thought he heard something, a voice, barely audible through static, but when he grabbed the handset, there was nothing but interference. High above them, invisible in the storm, Aurora was still climbing. Aurora's fingers slipped. For one terrible second, she was falling. Wind roared in her ears. Snow and darkness spun around her. Her stomach lurched as gravity claimed her. Her left hand caught a rock outcropping. The impact nearly dislocated her shoulder, but her grip held. She slammed against the cliff face, gasping, heart hammering against her ribs. For 10 seconds, she hung by one hand, feet scraping for purchase on ice-slick rock. 400 meters of empty air yawned below her. She forced herself to breathe. 6 counts in, 7 counts hold, 8 counts out. The breathing technique Rachel Vance had taught her. It slowed her heart rate, cleared her mind, transformed panic into focus. Her right hand found another hold. She pulled herself up, found footing, continued climbing. The near fall had cost her 10 minutes and a significant amount of adrenaline. Her hands were shaking now, and not just from cold, but she couldn't stop. The seals were counting on her, whether they knew it or not. She reached another ledge and pressed herself flat. A spotlight suddenly blazed to life above her, sweeping across the cliff face in a systematic pattern. Enemy sentries, scanning for exactly what she was attempting. Aurora didn't move. The light passed over her, and for a moment she was certain she'd been spotted. Her white camouflage helped, but at this range, any motion would give her away. The spotlight moved on. Voices called out in Russian, all clear. The light extinguished. Aurora waited another 30 seconds, then continued up. She was close now, maybe 50 meters from the ridge line. She could hear generator engines, smell diesel fuel mixing with snow. 2 more sentries appeared directly above her. They stood at the edge of the cliff, smoking cigarettes and talking. One of them flicked his lighter, a tiny flame that ruined their night vision but gave Aurora precious information about their positions. She couldn't use her rifle. The sound would alert the entire installation. Instead, she drew her combat knife from its sheath. The blade was cold enough to stick to her glove. She peeled it free carefully. Aurora waited until both sentries were facing away, then moved. She pulled herself over the ledge silently, boots finding solid ground for the first time in 4 hours. The first sentry never saw her coming. She drove the knife between his 4th and 5th ribs, angling up toward the heart. He died without making a sound. She caught his body as it fell and lowered it gently to the snow. The second sentry turned. Mikhail? Aurora was already moving. She crossed the distance between them in 2 steps, her knife finding his throat before he could cry out. Warm blood steamed in the frozen air. She dragged both bodies into a shallow depression behind a rock formation, then paused to catch her breath. Her shoulder throbbed where she'd caught herself during the fall. Probably torn muscle, possibly worse. But that was a problem for later. From this vantage point, she could see the enemy installation clearly. A steel bunker built into the mountainside, surrounded by sandbags and camouflage netting. 3 artillery pieces positioned in reinforced emplacements. Perhaps 40 or 50 soldiers moving between positions. And there, in the center of it all, the command bunker. A reinforced structure with armored observation ports and thermal imaging cameras scanning the approaches. Aurora pulled out her rangefinder and began calculating distances. The command bunker was 600 meters away, protected by multiple layers of security. Getting close enough for a shot would be nearly impossible. The thermal cameras would detect her body heat long before she was in range. Unless she could find another way. Aurora studied the bunker for 20 minutes, memorizing every detail. Guard rotations. Camera sweep patterns. The ventilation shaft on the western side, half hidden by a snowdrift. That ventilation shaft was her way in. She waited until the next guard rotation, then moved. The installation was designed to defend against frontal assault, not against someone who'd already penetrated their perimeter from an impossible direction. She reached the ventilation shaft and examined it carefully. The grating was secured with 4 bolts. Standard military construction strong enough to prevent tampering, but not designed for someone with proper tools and motivation. Aurora pulled a multi-tool from her kit and began working on the bolts. The metal was so cold it burned her fingers even through gloves. She worked methodically, ignoring the pain. The first bolt came free. Then the second. A patrol passed within 10 meters of her position, but she remained motionless, trusting her camouflage and the falling snow. Third bolt, fourth bolt, the grating came loose. She lifted it carefully and peered into the shaft. The ventilation tunnel was barely wide enough for her shoulders. Perfect. Too small for most soldiers to consider as a security risk. But Aurora had spent her childhood squeezing through tight spaces, exploring caves and crawl spaces that terrified other kids. She slipped into the shaft feet first, pulling the grating back into place behind her. Darkness swallowed her completely. The tunnel descended at a steep angle. Aurora braced herself against the walls and moved carefully, inch by inch. The metal was so cold it felt like fire against her exposed skin. After 10 meters, the shaft widened slightly. She could hear voices now Russian, echoing through the ductwork. Commands being shouted, artillery calculations being called out. She reached a junction where the shaft split in two directions. Warm air came from the left, that would lead to the living quarters. Cooler air from the right, carrying the electronic smell of equipment. That was her target. Aurora followed the right tunnel. It curved downward, then leveled out. Through a grating ahead, she could see the interior of the command center. 12 soldiers, computer terminals, radio equipment, maps covering one entire wall. And in the center, wearing the insignia of an artillery captain, the man coordinating the bombardment of the SEAL position. Aurora pulled out a small thermite charge from her kit. She'd brought 3, intended for destroying equipment or creating diversions. Now, she had a different use for them. She placed the charge against the ventilation duct directly above the main computer terminals, then attached a remote detonator. The thermite would burn at over 2,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt through steel, destroy electronics, and create enough chaos for her to act. But first, she needed to get into position for the shot. She backed up through the duct system, following a parallel shaft that should lead to the observation deck. The thermal cameras would be focused outward, watching for external threats. They wouldn't detect her until she was already in position. She reached another grating and peered through. The observation deck was smaller than she'd hoped, barely 3 meters wide, with armored windows overlooking the valley. 2 guards stood at the windows, scanning the darkness through binoculars. Aurora checked her watch. The SEALs would be running out of ammunition soon. She'd already spent 6 hours on this climb. Time was running out. She prepared to remove the grating when movement below caught her attention. A full platoon was assembling near the artillery positions. They were preparing for an assault. The SEALs had maybe 30 minutes before they were overrun. Aurora made her decision. She removed the grating, dropped silently into the observation deck, and eliminated both guards with her knife before they could react. She dragged their bodies into a corner and took position at the window. Through her rifle scope, she could see the entire battlefield. The SEAL position was clearly visible, too visible. The enemy had them ranged perfectly. One more artillery barrage would be devastating. Aurora's shoulder throbbed as she settled the M200 against it. She'd need to make this shot count. She found the artillery captain through her scope. He was standing outside the command bunker, coordinating the assault. Range, 600 meters. Wind, 15 kilometers per hour, gusting. Temperature, -35 Celsius. She made the calculations instinctively, her breath fogging the scope. Her heart rate slowed to 50 beats per minute. The world narrowed to the crosshairs and the target. But before she could take the shot, alarms began blaring throughout the installation. Someone had found the dead guards. Her position was compromised. Boots pounded in the corridor outside the observation deck. Voices shouted in Russian intruder alert. All units respond. Aurora had maybe 60 seconds before they breached her position. She ignored the noise and focused on her scope. The artillery captain was moving, responding to the alarm. In another 10 seconds, he'd be inside the bunker and Aurora's shot would be impossible. Her finger found the trigger. Breath control. Heartbeat. The wind had shifted slightly. She adjusted her aim 2 degrees right to compensate. The door behind her exploded inward. Soldiers rushed in. Aurora fired. The M200 roared. The recoil slammed into her injured shoulder with agonizing force. Through the scope, she saw the armored window of the command bunker spiderweb with cracks, then shatter completely. The artillery captain fell, a red mist marking where his head had been. Chaos erupted below. Artillery crews spun toward the observation deck, Orders dissolved into confusion. Aurora didn't wait to see the result. She was already moving, rolling away from the window as automatic weapons fire chewed through the space where she'd been. Bullets ricocheted off armored glass, filling the air with supersonic whines. She triggered the thermite charge remotely. Below, in the command center, white-hot metal erupted through computer terminals. Screens exploded. Fire alarms added their shriek to the cacophony. The soldiers in the observation deck hesitated, torn between pursuing her and responding to the fire. Aurora used that moment to sprint for the interior door, firing her sidearm as she moved. 2 soldiers went down, 3 more dove for cover. She hit the corridor at a full run. Behind her, the observation deck was filling with smoke. Ahead, more soldiers were responding to the alarm. She was trapped between 2 forces. No, not trapped. This was exactly where she needed to be, creating chaos, drawing attention, buying the SEALs their window. Aurora pulled her second thermite charge and tossed it down the corridor. It detonated mid-air, spreading burning metal across the walls and floor. Soldiers screamed and fell back. She turned and ran the opposite direction, toward the installation's external emergency exit. It was designed to resist attack from outside, not from someone trying to get out. She hit the door at full speed, activating the emergency release. Red lights flashed. A klaxon wailed. The door swung open, and she tumbled out into the snow and darkness. The wind hit her like a wall. She was on the eastern side of the bunker, exposed to the full force of the storm, but she was also above the artillery positions now, with a clear view of the enemy's defensive line. Aurora found cover behind a snow-covered equipment shelter and set up her rifle again. Through the scope, she could see the result of her work. The command bunker was burning. Artillery crews were abandoning their positions to fight the fires. The carefully coordinated bombardment of the SEAL position had stopped completely. Down in the valley, she caught a glimpse of movement. The SEALs were advancing, using the confusion to break out of their trapped position, but the enemy was already reorganizing. A new officer, probably the captain's second-in-command, was shouting orders, trying to restore control. In another few minutes, they'd resume firing. Aurora needed to keep them off balance. She sighted on an ammunition storage area near the artillery positions. Her second shot struck a stack of shell casings. The resulting explosion lit up the mountainside like daylight. Secondary explosions followed. Stored ammunition cooked off in a cascading chain reaction. Soldiers fled in all directions. Through her scope, Aurora watched the SEALs moving through the chaos. Dante Larson led them forward in a disciplined advance, using fire and maneuver to clear enemy positions. They were going to make it, but Aurora's position was compromised. Thermal scans had finally located her. Tracers streaked toward her hiding place, kicking up fountains of snow. She abandoned the equipment shelter and ran for the ridgeline. Bullets chased her, close enough that she felt their passage in the air. Her injured shoulder screamed protest with each movement. A rock outcropping provided momentary cover. She dropped behind it and checked her ammunition. 3 rounds left in the rifle, 1 thermite charge, her sidearm with 12 rounds. Against an entire installation. Aurora allowed herself a grim smile. Those were better odds than she'd had when she started climbing. Artillery fire has ceased. Marcus's voice cracked with excitement. Sir, whatever she did, it worked. Dante didn't waste time with questions. All units, advance by teams. Marcus, take Sullivan and head for the extraction point. Everyone else, with me. We're pushing through while they're disorganized. The SEALs moved like they'd been unchained. 4 hours of being pinned down had turned to explosive action. They advanced up the slope in coordinated teams, suppressing enemy positions with precision fire. Dante saw the confusion in the enemy ranks. Soldiers were running in multiple directions. Some were fighting fires, others were searching for an infiltrator. Command and control had completely broken down. Contact front, James Bennett called out. A machine gun position opened fire from behind sandbags. Dante's team went to ground, returning fire. 2 SEALs flanked left while Dante kept the gunner's attention. Within 30 seconds, the position was silent. They pressed forward. The enemy was falling back, abandoning prepared positions without organized resistance. Whatever Aurora had done, she decapitated their leadership. Another explosion lit up the ridge above them. Dante looked up and saw flames reaching into the dark sky. A moment later, the distinctive crack of a sniper rifle echoed across the mountain. "That's her," someone said, and Dante heard the awe in the voice. "She's still fighting." "Keep moving," Dante ordered. They couldn't stop to help Aurora now. Their only chance was to complete the breakout while her distraction held. They reached the first artillery position. The gun crew had abandoned their weapon. Maps and firing solutions were scattered across tables, now covered with snow. Dante grabbed what looked important and stuffed it in his pack. "Sir, look at this." Marcus was examining a tactical display. "These aren't just artillery positions. It's a full battalion headquarters." Aurora was right. We walked into a major enemy installation. Dante studied the display. At least 3 companies, with support elements. His 8-man team had been up against 200 soldiers. They should have been annihilated. Another rifle shot from above. Dante made a decision. "Marcus, get Sullivan to the extraction point. Coordinate helicopter pickup. The rest of you, we're going up. I'm not leaving Specialist Hale on that mountain." "Sir, that's a direct violation of—" "I don't care," Dante interrupted. "That woman saved our lives. We're getting her out." No one argued. The SEALs turned and began climbing toward the sound of gunfire. Aurora moved through the darkness like she'd been born in it. The storm that had nearly killed her during the climb was now her greatest ally. Visibility was less than 10 meters. Thermal imaging was degraded by the falling snow. She was invisible. The enemy had sent at least 50 soldiers to find her. They moved in fire teams, sweeping the ridge with flashlights and thermal scopes. They were well-trained and disciplined, but they were hunting something they didn't understand. Aurora had positioned herself in a narrow ravine between 2 rock formations. From her vantage point, she could see 3 different approach routes. The terrain naturally funneled the search teams toward her position. She waited until the first team was 30 meters away, then fired. The round struck the lead soldier in the chest. He fell without a sound. The rest of the team immediately went prone, searching for the shooter. But Aurora had already moved, circling behind them using a route she'd identified earlier. She fired again from the new position. Another soldier fell. Confusion spread through the enemy ranks. They were taking fire from multiple directions, or so it seemed. In reality, it was just Aurora, using the terrain to create the illusion of multiple shooters. A team tried to flank her position, moving along the ridgeline. Aurora let them pass, then placed her last thermite charge in their retreat path. When they realized they'd overshot her position and tried to fall back, the thermite detonated, blocking their escape. She picked them off one by one as they tried to evade the burning metal. Another team approached from below. Aurora switched to her sidearm and let them come close 20 meters, 15, 10. When they were bunched together in the narrow ravine, she dropped 2 flashbang grenades down from above. The grenades detonated with blinding light and concussive force. The soldiers stumbled, disoriented. Aurora eliminated 3 before they recovered. She was operating on instinct now, pure combat reflex, honed by years of training. Her injured shoulder was numb. Her hands were so cold, she could barely feel her trigger finger. But her mind was clear, calculating angles and distances with mechanical precision. The enemy was learning, though. They were pulling back, refusing to advance into the kill zone she'd created. A smart move. They'd realized they were being manipulated by someone who understood the terrain better than they did. Aurora checked her ammunition. 2 rounds left in her sidearm, none for the rifle. She'd stretched her resources as far as they'd go. Time to leave. She began working her way along the ridge, moving toward what she hoped was the SEAL position. The temperature had dropped again -40, maybe colder. She was approaching the limits of human endurance. A spotlight found her. She dove for cover as heavy machine gun fire raked the rocks where she'd been standing. They'd brought up a vehicle-mounted weapon, and it was shredding her cover. Aurora assessed her options. They were all bad. The machine gun had her pinned. Enemy infantry was closing from both sides. She was out of ammunition and out of tricks. She heard voices below. English, American accents. The SEALs had come for her. Dante saw the machine gun position and understood immediately. Aurora was pinned behind a rock formation, taking sustained fire. They had maybe 2 minutes before the enemy infantry completed their encirclement. "Bennett, Torres, take out that gun," he ordered. "Everyone else, lay down, suppressing fire. We're getting her out." The SEALs opened up as one. Tracer rounds streaked through the darkness. The enemy machine gun turned toward this new threat, giving Aurora a moment of relief. Bennett and Torres flanked right, moving with practiced efficiency. They reached a position above the machine gun emplacement and dropped thermite grenades directly onto it. The weapon fell silent, its crew scattered by the burning metal. "Aurora," Dante called out. "Specialist Hale, we're here to extract you." Movement from behind the rocks. Aurora emerged, moving stiffly. Even in the darkness, Dante could see she was in bad shape. Her left arm hung at an awkward angle. Ice had formed on her face mask. "About time," she said, her voice hoarse. "I was running out of ways to entertain them." Enemy fire intensified. The infantry units had spotted the SEALs and were converging. This was about to become a very close-quarters fight. "Fall back to the ridgeline," Dante ordered, fighting withdrawal. "Aurora, can you move?" "I didn't climb this mountain to die on it," she replied. The SEALs began their retreat, moving by teams while maintaining fire superiority. But the enemy was pressing hard now, using their numerical advantage to overwhelm the Americans. "We need to slow them down," Marcus called out. Aurora looked around, assessing the terrain with professional detachment. The wind was howling down from the peak, creating a natural wind tunnel through the ravine. Snow was falling so heavily that visibility was nearly zero. "Give me your grenades," she said to Dante. "All of them." "What are you planning?" "The storm is getting worse. Wind is gusting at 50 kilometers per hour. If we can create enough snow disturbance in this ravine, it'll create a localized whiteout. They won't be able to see us." Dante understood immediately. He pulled every smoke and flashbang grenade from his team's equipment. Aurora took them and began placing them at strategic points along the ravine positions, where the blast would kick up maximum snow and disturb the wind patterns. "When I detonate these, move fast," she said. "You'll have maybe 3 minutes before the snow settles." She triggered the grenades remotely. The ravine erupted in overlapping explosions. Smoke mixed with kicked-up snow. The wind caught the disturbance and amplified it, creating a swirling wall of white that completely obscured visibility. "Move!" Dante shouted. The SEALs ran through the chaos. Behind them, enemy soldiers stumbled and fired blind, their weapons tracking phantoms in the storm. By the time the whiteout cleared, the Americans were gone. They moved down the mountain quickly, using routes Aurora had scouted during her climb. She led them around thermal sensors and patrol routes, through gaps in the defensive line that existed only because she'd created them. 2 kilometers from the extraction point, Aurora collapsed. Dante caught her before she hit the ground. Her skin was ice cold, her breathing shallow. "Hypothermia," he said. "She's shut down." They wrapped her in emergency blankets and carried her the rest of the way. Sullivan was already being loaded onto a helicopter when they arrived, the thump of rotors cutting through the storm. Medics rushed forward as Dante laid Aurora on a stretcher. Her eyes opened briefly, focusing on his face. "Did we make it?" she whispered. "Because of you," Dante replied. "You didn't just save us, you took out an entire battalion's command structure." Aurora's eyes drifted closed. "Good. Tell them I'm not freezing in the Alps. I just needed a nap." She was unconscious before she finished the sentence. Number. Part 10, The Storm Warrior, A Legend Begins. The medical report was stark. Core body temperature, 33 degrees Celsius. Severe hypothermia, torn rotator cuff, frostbite on 7 fingers, multiple contusions and lacerations. Aurora Hale should have been dead, but she wasn't. 2 days later, she was sitting up in a hospital bed in Germany, arguing with doctors about discharge procedures. Dante visited her on the 3rd day. He brought her personal effects, recovered from the mountain, her rifle, her maps, the knife she'd used to eliminate sentries. "They're recommending you for the Medal of Honor," he said without preamble. Aurora shrugged with her good shoulder. "I was just doing my job." "Your job was to provide sniper support. You infiltrated an enemy headquarters, eliminated their commanding officer, destroyed their command and control systems, and held off an entire battalion long enough for 8 SEALs to escape. That's a little beyond standard job duties." "Did Sullivan make it?" "He'll walk again, thanks to you. We all will." Dante sat down in the chair beside her bed. "I owe you an apology. When command attached you to our unit, I thought you were a diversity checkbox. Small, female, didn't look like you could handle the conditions." "I know what you thought," Aurora said. "Everyone does, until they see me work. You didn't just survive that storm. You used it, weaponized it. I've never seen anything like it. Rachel Vance taught me that, Aurora replied quietly. My instructor in Alaska. She said the environment isn't your enemy, it's just another tool. The enemy is anyone who thinks they can beat you on your own terrain. Dante was quiet for a moment. Then, the men are calling you something. A nickname. Let me guess. The crazy sniper who almost died. Close, Ghost of the Alps. Aurora smiled slightly. That's better than some of the names I've been called. Over the following weeks, the full scope of her operation became clear. Intelligence analysts studied the damage she'd inflicted. One sniper, operating alone in near-impossible conditions, had single-handedly destroyed the command structure of an enemy battalion. She'd eliminated 17 hostile combatants, destroyed critical infrastructure, and created enough chaos to allow a surrounded unit to escape. Military historians compared her actions to legendary operations from previous wars. But what made Aurora's achievement unique wasn't just what she'd done, it was how she'd done it. She'd turned the environment itself into a weapon, using cold and storm and darkness the way other soldiers used ammunition. The story spread. Other units requested her assignment. Training programs studied her tactics. She became something more than a soldier. She became proof that the impossible was just another word for difficult. 6 months later, Aurora returned to active duty. Her shoulder had healed, though it still ached in cold weather. She'd turned down a teaching position to stay in the field. Why? Her commanding officer asked. You could train the next generation. Share what you know. Aurora looked out the window at the mountains beyond the base. Snow covered their peaks, beautiful and deadly. Because somewhere out there, there's another impossible mission, she said. Another team that needs someone who doesn't know when to quit. And I'm not done being that person yet. She picked up her rifle case and walked toward the helicopter pad, where her next assignment waited. Behind her, soldiers watched with a mixture of respect and awe. The Ghost of the Alps was going back to work.